Comparison, and why we should stop comparing ourselves to others, ladies and gentlemen, so that we can experience a much higher quality of life. And isn't that what we all want, ladies and gentlemen? Well, welcome back to the channel. It is Wednesday, and you know what that means. It is time for some Wednesday wisdom, ladies and gentlemen, reading from Dr. Wayne W. Dyer's Wisdom of the Ages, 60 Days to Enlightenment. And like I just said, the topic for today is comparison. And it comes to us from a man by the name of Ogden Nash. He lived 1902 to 1971. And then me and Wayne Dyer will ramble about this topic of comparison in a way that we can learn from, and so that we can increase the quality of our lives and experience more happiness, more peace, and more purpose out of our lives, ladies and gentlemen. But Ogden Nash was an American writer of light verse. Ogden Nash is known for his sophisticated whimsy and satire style of writing. And so, like I said, 1902 to 1971, the piece we get here on the topic of comparison from Ogden Nash is titled, "So That's Who I Remind Me Of." You can already see the satire or the whimsical nature of this little poem, but let's dive right into it, ladies and gentlemen, and then see what we can learn and then apply to our lives from this topic of comparison so that we can live better lives, ladies and gentlemen. So that's who I remind me of is the title, and it begins, "When I consider men of golden talents, I'm delighted in my introverted way to discover as I'm drawing up the balance how much we have in common, I and they. Like Burns, I have a weakness for the bottle. Like Shakespeare, little Latin and less Greek. I bite my fingernails like Aristotle, and like Thackeray, I have a snobbish streak. I'm afflicted with the vanity of Byron. I've inherited the spitefulness of Pope. Like Petrarch, I'm a sucker for a siren, and like Milton, I have a tendency to mope. My spelling is suggestive of a Chaucer. Like Johnson, well, I do not wish to die. I also drink my coffee from the saucer. And if Goldsmith was a parrot, then so am I. Like Villain, I have debts and by the carload. Like Swinburne, I'm afraid I need a nurse. By my dicing is Christopher out Marlowe, and I dream as much as Coleridge, only worse. In comparison with men of golden talents, I am all a man of talent ought to be. I resemble every genius in his vice, however heinous, yet I write so much like me." Ogden Nash with a beautiful one there, ladies and gentlemen. That's very fascinating. He compares himself to the bad traits of all of these wonderful, well-known people like Shakespeare and Aristotle and Goldsmith. Quite a few of these, I didn't know who they were. Chaucer and Christopher Marlowe. Coleridge was one that stood out to me. But so this is very fascinating, ladies and gentlemen, on how, this isn't often the way that we think of comparison and comparing ourselves to others, because normally we compare ourselves to these people with golden talents, and it's the talents that we compare rather than their, negative sides. I like the one where he goes, "Oh yeah, I'm like this guy because he's got a taste for the bottle." Like Burns, I have a weakness for the bottle, but like Shakespeare, I'm a little Latin and less Greek. All these different things. It's very funny, ladies and gentlemen. So let's dive right into what Dr. Wayne Dyer has to teach us and has to say on this poem and this subject of comparison. Because comparison is one of those things that I think we don't really notice it a lot, but it's something that gives us a lot of struggle in life. Wishing we were in a greater position than we are. So in other words, not appreciating where we are in order to grow. We've talked about deficiency motivation versus growth motivation before, but it's like seeing the place where we are as not good enough, and then looking at other people and where they are, it's always greener on the other side of the fence. And we don't realize the problems that these people that we compare ourselves to have, but we realize the things that they do have that we wish we had. And so we feel ourselves lesser than they, and we beat ourselves up. And, we begin some type of negative self-talk that is very subconscious, and it becomes a very bad routine, ladies and gentlemen. If you do it often enough, you find yourself doing it all the time, which is bad. So let's dive right into this. Wayne Dyer begins by saying Ogden Nash was known for his great sense of humor and his audacious verse, which was often ragged and highly varied, from the one-word sentences to lines that meandered for a full paragraph. He won a large following during his lifetime, particularly for poetry that satirized everyday foibles. In this selection, he pokes fun at himself by justifying his weaknesses as they line up with men of golden talents, who are some of the world's best poets. And so while this poem was obviously written with, tongue in cheek, nevertheless, it highlights the tendency that many of us have to compare ourselves to others. And so it seems easier to look at our behavior in a comparison to others to judge where we stand in life. And so virtually all our upbringing at home and school used the comparison method. So this is an important fact right here, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you got yourself a nice beverage and are comfy. I always love the green tea there. Even when it's warm out, green tea is good for me, ladies and gentlemen. But so, when we begin to learn, how do we stop comparing ourselves to others and stop the comparison game? It's like, well, we need to look at how we created this behavior in the first place. And so Wayne's saying here that virtually all of our upbringing at home and in school used a method of comparison to teach us. And so it's like, maybe on purpose, but that would be a deeper, more conspiratorial subject, or maybe just by accident or the structure of the system. All of those could be deeper subjects to be discussed and thought about. But anyways, how, for whatever reason, home and school and, virtually most of life in our upbringing as children used this comparison method. And most of us, Wayne Dyer continues, were groomed to fit somewhere in the middle. It's like you have to be vanilla so that everyone likes you. Or I'm thinking about this in marketing terms. So when you do a television commercial, it has to be real quote unquote vanilla, not like mint double chocolate, metaphorically, as a flavor or a style, because not everybody likes mint double chocolate, but most everybody will take vanilla. And so somewhere in the middle, not really being your true authentic self, ladies and gentlemen. And so, it's like this idea of fitting, we were groomed, from home and school through this comparison method. And most of us were groomed to fit somewhere in the middle, depending on how everyone else stacked up. So for purposes of evaluation, Wayne is saying here, the standardized curve was applied to determine just where we fit. And you can see how this plays a role in our development as people, going from children to young adults and adolescents to becoming, adults. It's important to remember that we're full, complete people the whole way through. But that's a different topic. Virtually, all of our upbringings use this comparison method. And so we try, forced to fit somewhere in the middle, depending on how everybody else stands. And so for purposes of finding out where you do stand on the graph of comparison to everybody else, the system created a standardized curve. So that way you fit and you stack up somewhere along that curve, ladies and gentlemen. And then they can tell whether you're good or bad for purposes of evaluation. And this curve was applied to determine just where we fit. You can just tell what a great, wonderful system these these century-old people have set up for us. Sorry. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's my own grievances. Anyways, um, in the middle. So the standardized curve was applied to determine just where we fit, being in geography, mathematics, or what to wear, or what curfew to obey. Whatever everybody else was doing was consistently used as a barometer to determine what we should be doing, ladies and gentlemen. And so remember, this is how we got this stuck into our brains, this comparison, that thing that we do all the time without even usually noticing it. Like we'll be walking down an aisle at the grocery store and compare ourselves to somebody, and more often than not, it's causing us negative, internal dialogue, negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative emotions. And so this is why we need to learn the true nature and the true functioning of reality in our own mind and our own selves in order to increase the quality of life. Because when we discover the wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen, and have a greater awareness and greater understanding of the world we find ourselves in, and the way that we have become the way that we are, and when we know that we can change, especially when we discover how we've become the way that we are, then we really have true power, ladies and gentlemen. That is taking back our power. And so we're going beyond comparison. And so, consistently used as a barometer to determine what we should be doing. There were school transcripts, Wayne continues saying, and social report cards as well. Comparison as a means of assessment was so prevalent in our upbringings that it is most likely the means you employ for assessing your adult life, as well as managing the lives of your family members. Hmm? Hmm? Yet comparing one person to another, Wayne continues, negates each person's uniqueness and is often insulting to each person individually. And comparisons will never lead you to self-knowledge. So, ladies and gentlemen, ask yourself the question, do you want to negate or remove each person's uniqueness? Because, like if I suck at drawing portraits, does that mean that I suck? It's like, well, sure, I'm drawing portraits, but somebody else probably sucks at painting landscapes. So we all suck. And in that sense, we're all good, ladies and gentlemen. And I think that's where we need to get to is everybody sucks at something, so we're all damn perfect. It's like, what's the deal with this getting rid of our own uniqueness and insulting our individuality just because, just based on the purpose of where we're ranked on a scale of 1 to 10 on some standardized curve of evaluation. Now, so comparing yourself negates each person's uniqueness, our own individuality, and it never leads to self-discovery of what we truly are and what we truly want in life, which I think is one of the things that causes us the most pain and the most lack of purpose and drive and pleasure and, contentment and fulfillment out of life, is because we don't even know what it is we want to do, because we're so convinced our entire lives that we need to fit into what everybody else thinks we need to do to be a productive and, high quality citizen, that we never find our true purpose. I think of a story Wayne tells in one of his lectures. He goes, I talked to this guy one time after a speech that I gave, and he said, Wayne, I've been working at this factory for 30 years, and it makes the income and things. And Wayne said, well, what do you really love? What's your true passion? He goes, my apple orchard. He goes, I have this apple orchard and I take care of these apples. And he starts going into all these details about apples. Like you got to pick them at the right time, and you have to, right when the temperature gets to a certain point, and then you have to store them a certain way for a certain amount of days. And there's all these processes, and the greatest apple pie. And, there's all these things. And it's like, and so Wayne tells the guy, he goes, so your true purpose in life is these apples, right? The guy goes, yeah, but I just don't think, that I really want to leave my job because, there's the security there. I feel more safe. And that's fine. The purpose of the conversation was not to tell everybody to quit their jobs, which is, something pretty drastic when it comes to finding purpose in life. And I wasn't sure we'd be going down this rabbit hole, but just for a quick ramble to teach on this topic, because it's like, this topic of comparison, uniqueness, and always feeling like we have to fit in is like his true joy was his apples, out there in the fields with the trees and, in his apple orchard. And so, I mean, there's people out there that need apple juice and applesauce and apple pies and apple butter. And so, there's a million ways that you can, if you're willing to take the risk. Sometimes it's not so much the willingness, it's sometimes not so much the fear to fail or the willingness to try, but the diligence to get over the fear and the willingness, to increase the willingness to try it. So I just wanted to leave that ramble there for that point. If I can even self-knowledge, self-discovery through letting go of comparison, ladies and gentlemen. So you can discover these things about yourselves, like your true purpose is your apple orchard, if you get out of this comparison structure and having to do what it is we've always thought we had to do. But as you can tell, that's a different subject. It is comfortable, Wayne says, and continues, to search outside of oneself for validation, if that is what others also do. And if approximately 68% of the people are doing it, then we might be tempted to interpret that as the right way. So see how we can get confused, ladies and gentlemen? We repeat the conditioning of the past and search out there somewhere for that which resides in here. So the conditioning of the past is telling us to look out here for what is really findable on the inside, ladies and gentlemen. When we continually compare our lives to others, that is what we're doing. We're looking outside instead of inside. So I like this statement by Lao Tzu, Wayne says, the founder of Taoism, and the Tao Te Ching, which we do every Tuesday Tao, learning the wisdom of the Tao. And so Lao Tzu said on this subject, he who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened. So I'll say that again. He who knows others is wise, but he who knows himself is enlightened. When we resort, Wayne continues, to comparisons of any kind, the most we can hope for is some wisdom. But to become truly enlightened, ladies and gentlemen, truly enlightened, we must know and honor the unique creation that each of us is. And when we can even honor the fact that we are a unique divine creation, regardless of your success or your status or your persona or your image or your looks or what people say about you or don't say about you, all of those things removed, you are a divine creation, perfect and whole, just as you are in each moment. And when we can truly come to discover that about ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, that is the real secret of finding happiness and peace in whatever kind of life we have. But we must honor the unique creation that each of us is. And this is the genius, the enlightenment that is never found near the median and in the mundane, rules of society that we find ourselves sticking to. And so ceaselessly striving towards the highest and widest point, Wayne continues, on the normal bell curve, and avoiding the narrow ends representing the extremes is, as I'm sure you are aware, not the path I think anyone need follow. Why? Because the creative genius is found in those more distant positions away from the median. Remember the poem we read about the path, not so traveled or something like that. It was the path not so often taken, but it talked about this same idea of how everybody takes this path, but going down a different path is where the true inspiration and genius and discovery and enlightenment, self-awareness is found, ladies and gentlemen. Jean Piaget is a famous Swiss psychiatrist, Wayne says, who researched the ways in which students could best achieve in school. He provided me with an important insight. Remember, Wayne was a teacher for quite a while, college professor, I'm pretty sure, taught doctorate students, which I have never forgotten. This important insight, when I was a young doctoral student many years ago, Wayne says, his experiments with school children confirmed that learning and levels of achievement are different for different individuals. So in any classroom in which one method of instruction, say lecturing, was the sole means of presenting the material after an exam was given at the end of the instruction periods, the levels of achievement resembled a standardized curve. Remember, we were talking about this standardized curve and the one way to do everything, with approximately 2/3 of students in the C or average range, which was me usually, or C or whatever. 1/4 divided in half above and below the average, which I fit into sometimes D and B grades. 6% divided equally as failures or high achievers, F and A. With any tiny fractions in what are called distant deviations from the center, that is, a tiny fraction are geniuses, and a tiny fraction simply absorb nothing. But this is not what impressed me, Wayne says, nor is it what I always remembered. Piaget said then, if you were to change the method of delivery form, which I could think about here on this channel, maybe use some visual graphics or some kind of things so that people could see a diagram of what I'm trying to describe, but that might be in the future. I'm trying to keep this simple so I can be consistent, ladies and gentlemen, twice a week and maybe more in the future. So I'm here for you. And if you're getting value, consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, smash the like button and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. So with tiny fractions or what, that is, you either have these geniuses on top or those who absorb nothing because of your teaching method. And you have all of these standardized, because there's only one curriculum created by the system, ladies and gentlemen. But this is not what impressed me, Wayne says, nor is it why I've always remembered what Piaget said then. He said, if you change the method of the delivery form, say lecturing to drawings, and then you get the same standardized distribution, a tiny fraction of geniuses and zeros, 6% A and F, 25% D and B, 67% C plus to C minus. But the startling thing is that you now have new people in the genius range and the zero ranges. Fascinating. And so what's the difference in the people? You now have the same people in the zero ranges and the genius range. And when you try another method of delivery with the same group, say small group discussions or video presentations, with each new method of instruction on the very same material, you find new geniuses, new zeros, and a whole new group of averaging individuals every time. And so the same people that were geniuses listening to the lectures are now idiots, or zeros, trying to learn from the drawings and the video presentations. And so what that says, ladies and gentlemen, is that each of us learn in different ways. And so, if you haven't learned a lot from these videos, that's probably the reason. I'm kidding, ladies and gentlemen. I'm kidding. Now, this is fascinating. So you'll always find new geniuses, new zeros, and new averages when you change the method of delivery. For me, Piaget's profound conclusion, Wayne says, was unforgettable, especially when you're a teacher. There's a genius in every single person. That's the lesson as an educator. And that's the lesson for all of us. There is a genius in you, ladies and gentlemen. You just have to find out the best way that you learn and begin learning the wisdom of the ages and the wisdom of the Tao. But, begin learning the things that can change and increase the quality of our lives and figure out how we learn that. So this conclusion was unforgettable, Wayne says. There is a genius in every single person. And all we as educators or parents or directors of our own lives, that's more important. Each of us is the director of our own life, need to do this. We need to find the method that will allow that genius to be revealed within each of us, ladies and gentlemen. I had no idea this was going to be the direction that this went, but here we are. How to become great by going beyond comparison and not comparing yourselves to others. Ogden Nash's humorous and satirical poem, So That's Who I Remind Me Of, reminds you how absurd it is to compare yourself to anyone else at any time. His conclusion, Wayne says, reveals the truth of this assertion. Yet I write so much like me, quote unquote. And that is all he could ever do, was be himself. And that's all that we can do, ladies and gentlemen, is be ourselves. And then when we are fine with that, we can begin trying to be the best version of ourselves and increase the quality of our life, and in turn increase the quality of the lives of those around us. And so all he could ever do was be himself. Often, Wayne says, in our efforts to fit in and be accepted and be, in the middle and in the median, we ambush ourselves by looking to see how we compare to others. It is because we have been conditioned since our first days in school, and so it is so easy to forget that our own individual genius may not have evolved. The idea of comparing yourself to anyone else seems absurd when you know that you are a unique individual, and when you align yourself with the method, the people, and the circumstances that feel just right for you, then we can have new possibilities, ladies and gentlemen. You know in your heart, as I do when I write, Wayne says, or speak, or run a marathon, or wash my car, or even brush my teeth. He says, I do not need to compare my actions with other people to decide how to do them. So we are free when we can say, this is my way. What is your way? Because the way does not exist. That doesn't mean that the way, the Tao, doesn't exist, but it's like we're unique. So the way for us is individual. And so there is a way, ladies and gentlemen. What is your way? What is right for you to, reveal that genius within yourself and discover your true purpose by going beyond the subconscious self-comparison things that we've been taught from the beginning. And so, I am free when I no longer need to see, Wayne continues, what I share in common with those men of golden talents. The conclusion is the same one that Ogden Nash reached. Yet I write so much like me. Stop comparing and begin composing your life, your way. That book you see in the back there on the top of that stack right there, that's The Creative Compass by Dan Millman. And if you've ever wanted, I'm really been thinking about it for a year or so now, wanting to begin composing my own writing. I mean, I have stacks of notes and things, but it's not really composed in a correct way. And so that's me wanting to begin composing my own writing in my own uniqueness in my own way. And the comparison to others is something that's very difficult to get over in that process. And even in my paintings and stuff, it's like you can see, ladies and gentlemen, how this comparison parasite has latched onto us so well, and that it's going to take a lot of work for us to begin to remove this comparison and the sabotage and the self-judgment that we do to ourselves. And so stop comparing and begin composing your life, your way. And so to reduce the habit of comparing yourself with others, begin to practice these suggestions, ladies and gentlemen. And this is why you should get this book for your shelf and yourself, to put it on your shelf. And I have it linked in the description below the video. So expand the description. It goes boop, gets bigger, and then you'll find links to my landscape paintings and the book itself, as well as some other wonderful opportunities. Because at the end of each of these chapters, in this book, there's this, a practical way that we can apply the wisdom of the ages into our life today. So today's topic, of course, was comparing ourselves to others in comparison. So to reduce the habit of comparing ourselves with others, begin to practice these suggestions, ladies and gentlemen. And you can write these down if you want, or just take simple notes. Number one, your own personal index. Use your own personal index for evaluating yourself and your performances. Am I content with myself rather than I'm not good, or, I'm not as good as my sister or my brother or whoever it be. So am I content with myself rather than, am I as good as somebody else? So that's the difference there. It's an inward focus. When you find yourself in the old habit, this is number two. When you find yourself in the old habit of comparison, stop right in the moment and catch yourself. Become aware. Because becoming aware is the beginning of changing a habit, changing this habit of comparison. As you were about to say, I guess I'm about average in something. Stop and rephrase to, this is how I perform, and I am fine with it. And I'll add, and I can practice and get better over time. And that is just fine. And that's a growth motivation versus a deficiency motivation, ladies and gentlemen. Number three, don't use comparisons with your children. So big, because when we're children, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, this is how we got programmed into doing this as adults. We could be 57 years out here doing this. Luckily, I'm only 32, 31, who knows? But it's like, so don't use comparisons with your children unless you expect them in return. So unless you expect your children to compare you. For every time you say all the other children at school are expected to do some household chores, expect to hear something like, well, no other parents make their kids go to bed this early. I remember using that one, ladies and gentlemen, don't we all? Woo! So if you don't want to hear that, that's a good tip there from Dr. Wayne Dyer. And I bet my mom's laughing because I think she's been reading Wayne Dyer's book, What Do You Really Want for Your Children? It's his book on parenting. And that's so funny, ladies and gentlemen. So remember, this is number three here. So don't use comparisons with your children unless you expect them in return. So, instead of all other kids are expected to do this, then your kids will say, well, all other parents don't make their kids do this. And so the habit becomes insidious and will pass from generation to generation. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, we've got to the position we are. This lack of enlightenment is because we've passed it from generation to generation. So it's time to make a change in each of our own lives so that what we pass to the next generation is something far greater, ladies and gentlemen, something far more powerful, not just fitting in and being average and being a good student and making a paycheck. Because that used to be the way that our grandparents and parents thought this world was. But now I think each of us, including them, even if our grandparents were still here today or are today, if you're lucky enough to be that way, would say, good rhyming there, that there is a new way. And it is time today to make that change, ladies and gentlemen. But that was just my own rant about the future. Anyways, there's still number 3 here. The habit becomes insidious and will pass from generation to generation unless you stop using comparison as a standard for evaluation. Change your directions to, quote, I expect you to do your housework and your chores, and it has nothing to do with anybody else. Wayne said it in the way of, it has nothing to do with your friends, like a parent talking to his child. Whew, powerful. Powerful, ladies and gentlemen. This is life-changing stuff about, going beyond self-sabotage and getting rid of comparing ourselves to others. I'm hoping I can title this correctly so that the algorithms will get this to people that really need it, because this is a powerful one, ladies and gentlemen. If you're still here in this video, please share this with people that you know that are like-minded, that can use this, and so they can stop comparing and self-sabotaging and feeling so down about themselves. Because we're all perfect, ladies and gentlemen, just the way that we are, and we can get better with that knowledge. Now, number 4, and finally, if you are not as talented or expert as you want to be at a particular thing, I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, there's an area in each of our lives. For me, it's been my artistic endeavors, or even creating these YouTube videos and trying to tell people and share with people the wisdom that I learned that has helped me. But it's like, if you're not as talented or expert as you want to be at a particular thing, remind yourself that it's not because that you are deficient. It is the result of your unique reaction to an experience of this event. So your genius may reside elsewhere, or it may require you to be exposed to another way of learning and practicing. So respect your individuality and your uniqueness, ladies and gentlemen, and resist speculating on how you compare to others. Notice and stop yourself in the process, because comparison always puts the controls of your life in the hands of those whom you compare yourself to. Boom! To wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. Fireworks, round of applause. That was fantastic on how we can change our lives by stop comparing ourselves to others, by stopping the comparison that so often defeats us. Well, without any rambling, ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave it right there. That was, that's one you got to meditate on. And by meditate, I mean think deeply about for some time, and then begin to move forward and act on it. But I think the most important thing about all of these things, as you could tell, we're almost to the end of the book here, ladies and gentlemen. I think we only have two more wonderful topics. And I'll leave it a surprise for next week what those wonderful topics are, ladies and gentlemen. That'll be next Wednesday. I'm getting kind of sad thinking that we're almost over, but we have more wonderful things to bring your way. So don't you get worried. Don't you get worried, ladies and gentlemen. But the one key, as I was just getting to a second ago, about all of these lessons we've learned in the wisdom of the ages and the wisdom of the Tao, is that noticing and awareness. That's why I always say, remember, seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness, a greater understanding, like a greater scope. And like you can see it. You're like, wow, I'm judging myself. Wow, I'm judging others. Wow, I'm, beating myself, like all of these negative things that we do that decreases the quality of our life. It comes back to awareness, ladies and gentlemen, and noticing, becoming the noticer of your own life, rather than just being the drone and fitting in the middle and doing what everybody expects you to do. It's like the old rules of self-actualization. It's like becoming independent of not only the bad opinion of other people, but the good opinion of other people. becoming independent of the good opinion of others, having no investment in power over people, and becoming detached from the outcomes and just being on purpose. And making happiness the way, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I always say as well. Begin to make happiness the way. Make it the activity that you bring to life, because there is no way to happiness. It is the way. And so then the goals that we've always been striving for, telling ourselves, well, I'll be happy when I get there, become irrelevant, ladies and gentlemen, because we are already there. And then the entire journey is wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I love and appreciate everyone, especially those of you who spend time here with me and Dr. Wayne Dyer and Lao Tzu and Ogden Nash today, and all the wonderful authors and poets of the wisdom of the ages. And, remember, ladies and gentlemen, you can bring out the genius that is within you. You can change your life. You can stop comparing yourselves to others. And you can find true happiness, true purpose, true contentment in your life. You just have to find the way. And sometimes we all learn in different ways. And so seek to discover that way for yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Seek to find that enlightenment, that self-awareness that was talked about today. That was a good one. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, expand the description below. Please purchase one of my landscape paintings. I love sending them out to people. I usually send an extra with it just because I have so many and I sell them so rarely. But so anyways, check that out, and also get the book for yourself. There's also a link to the audio book if you learn better by listening rather than reading, or watch this series if you learn better by watching rather than listening or reading. But either way, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to help me out by subscribing, and if you're already subscribed, then leave a comment and like and share this with somebody that you think could really use this. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, be the change that you want to see, and try to be that influence, at least for one person this week, of positivity, and tell them that they don't need to compare themselves with others as much as we all so often do. All right, love you, ladies and gentlemen.